A girl named Amélie lives in Paris, in the ancient neighborhood of Montmartre. Since childhood she has had an unusual life. Her father Raphael was an aloof man who worked as a doctor. Amandine's mother was a nervous and tense woman who died in an accident when a tourist from Canada fell on her. Amélie's upbringing was unlike the usual. Because her father mistook her for being ill due to a nervous heartbeat, she did not go to school and led a very withdrawn life with virtually no friends. Her only friend was an imaginary crocodile. After the death of her mother, Amélie becomes even more withdrawn. She continues to live with her father, who is completely immersed in tending the garden, ignoring the world around her. One day Amélie decides to start an independent life and moves to Paris. She finds a job in a small cafe where various colorful characters work. In the cafe works Georgette, constantly complaining about her illnesses, Gina, eccentric waitress, and Joseph, paranoid, who records conversations on a tape recorder. All of them are permanent residents of this cozy place, where the atmosphere is relaxed and a little crazy. One day, after a chance find, Amélie's life changes. In her apartment behind the tiles she finds an old metal box full of children's treasures, figurines, badges and small things that, as it turns out, belonged to a boy who lived in the apartment many years ago. Amélie decides to return the box to its owner to give him the joy of finding a long-forgotten childhood. She begins a search that leads her to an elderly man named Dominique Bretideau, who was the boy. Seeing the joy that fills his eyes, Amélie feels that her mission is accomplished. She decides to dedicate her life to bringing happiness to others. Amélie begins to secretly intervene in the lives of others by creating small miracles. She helps her neighbor Madame Susan, a cigarette seller, to gain confidence by setting her up on a date with an admirer. She organizes love affairs, bringing lonely people together, helps hypochondriac Georgette and a regular customer of the cafe Joseph to become a couple. Amélie also takes care of her father, who has fallen into depression after the death of his wife. She kidnaps his favorite gnome and arranges for him to travel around the world. The father receives photos of the gnome against the background of famous world sites and gradually comes out of his depression, deciding to go on a trip himself. However, despite all her efforts to improve the lives of others, Amélie remains lonely. She is afraid to enter into real relationships, preferring to observe the world from her shell. Her house is full of little things, each with its own story, but she avoids deep attachments. However, everything changes when she accidentally meets Nino, a young man who collects discarded photo cards from vending machines in subway stations. He works in a sex shop and also works part-time at amusement rides, but his passion is these strange photos of people he knows nothing about. One day Amélie finds his lost album with these photos and decides to return it to its owner. But instead of just giving the album back, she starts an elaborate game, leaving him clues and signs. Nino begins to search for the mysterious stranger who found his album, and gradually begins to suspect that Amélie is behind all the weirdness. But she continues to hide and avoids meeting him face to face. She fears that a real relationship could destroy her illusory world that she has been building for so long. Meanwhile, another character appears in Amélie's life, an old artist named Raymond Dufayel, whom everyone calls the Man of Glass. He lives in a neighboring apartment, and because of his disease, his bones are extremely fragile and he never leaves the house. Every year he repaints the same painting of Renoir's Breakfast of the Oarsman, but he can't capture the face of one of the figures in the painting. A friendship develops between him and Amélie, and he becomes the only person who sees her true identity. He helps her realize that hiding from the world and avoiding love is not the answer and that she needs to make bolder decisions in her life. Amélie begins to realize that her life is full of fears and indecision. She realizes that her interference in other people's lives is just an attempt to hide her own loneliness. She sees other people finding happiness through her efforts, but she remains on the sidelines, afraid to take the first step. She realizes that her life will pass her by if she doesn't decide to make a change. After much deliberation, Amélie decides to meet Nino. But even at this stage she continues to play games, arranging complicated meetings and leaving him cryptic messages. Nino, in turn, also begins to suspect that his mysterious guide is Amélie, but does not dare to make the first step. However, after all these complicated manipulations, Amélie still finds the courage to invite Nino to her home. When they finally meet, a mutual attraction instantly flares up between them. Amélie and Nino begin a relationship and she feels truly happy for the first time in a long time. Her world changes and she no longer feels so lonely and sad. She realizes that all her efforts to improve the lives of others were, in fact, and attempt to hide her own loneliness, and now that she has found love she no longer needs to hide. Raymond, observing their relationship, completes his painting, finally managing to capture the very face he has long been unable to. He realizes that his art has also changed thanks to Amelie, and that there has been an important turning point in her life as well. She is no longer hiding in the shadows, but is coming out into the light to start living for real. In the finale, Amelie and Nino are happy together. They ride around the city on a motorcycle, enjoying every moment. Amelie is no longer afraid to be herself, and her life takes on new colors. She realizes that she has found her place in the world and that her life finally makes sense. She no longer hides behind masks and tries to change other people's lives, forgetting about her own. Now she lives for herself, opening her heart to the love and joy she has been avoiding for so long. Amelie's story is a story about the importance of not being afraid to be yourself, the importance of opening up to the world and allowing yourself to love. It is a story about how each of us can make a difference in the lives of others, but it is important not to forget about our own lives. Amelie found her path, and this path led her to the happiness she had long sought but was afraid to accept. Now she is free and happy, and her life is full of love and joy.